The average British worker today can buy roughly the same amount with their wages as they could in 2008, 16 years, and real pay has barely budged. You're working just as hard, maybe harder, but your pay slip tells a different story. This isn't about lazy workers or bad luck. Britain has experienced something unprecedented in modern history. 2 decades where wages simply stopped growing for most people. The question nobody wants to answer is why. The numbers paint a grim picture. Between 2009 and 2024, average real earnings increased by only a few percent total. Not annually, total. That's less growth in 15 years than workers used to see in 2. Think about what this means for everyday life. Many roles' real pay is around its late 2000s level. Technology has revolutionized, the world has transformed, but their ability to afford a decent life has stood still. At just under 18% of GDP, UK investment sits at the bottom of the G7 league table. Public sector workers have fared even worse. Their real pay sat 1% below 2007 levels. These are nurses, teachers, and civil servants keeping the country running. Yet they're literally poorer than their predecessors despite a decade and a half of experience. The regional picture adds another layer of misery. Many local authorities across the Midlands and North report real wages below their 2008 peaks. Entire communities have experienced not stagnation, but actual decline. Places that once thrived on manufacturing and industry now offer mainly warehouse and service jobs, paying far less in real terms than the work they replaced. The heart of Britain's wage problem beats with a simple rhythm: productivity. Wages can only grow sustainably when workers produce more value per hour. UK productivity grew at roughly 2% yearly, a healthy pace that supported steady wage increases. Since then, that engine has sputtered and stalled. This isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. Productivity is about having the right tools, technology, and systems to work effectively. When a construction worker uses outdated equipment because their firm can't afford upgrades, they produce less. When an office worker wrestles with ancient software systems, they waste hours on tasks that should take minutes. Multiply this across millions of workers, and you understand why wages can't rise. The productivity collapse has been deeper and more persistent in Britain than almost anywhere else in the developed world. While other countries recovered from 2008's shock and resumed growth, the UK remained stuck. Quarterly productivity figures bounce around like a pinball, showing occasional upticks but no sustained improvement. Output per hour worked in 2024 remains only marginally above 2019 levels. The knock-on effects ripple everywhere. Companies can't afford significant pay rises when their output per worker hasn't increased. Workers can't demand higher wages when their productivity hasn't improved. It becomes a vicious cycle. Low productivity means low investment, which means continued low productivity. This productivity disaster didn't happen overnight. Years of decisions, both deliberate and accidental, created the perfect conditions for stagnation. Britain invests less in its economy than in any other major developed nation. At just under 18% of GDP, UK investment sits at the bottom of the G7 league table. It's like trying to win a Formula One race with a 10-year-old engine while your competitors upgrade every season. This chronic underinvestment shows up everywhere. Factory floors still use equipment from the Blair years. Office workers rely on IT systems that belong in a museum. Transport infrastructure creaks under the strain of decades of patches rather than proper renewal. The entire economy runs on yesterday's technology while competing against countries equipped for tomorrow. Private businesses bear much of the blame. UK firms invest less in equipment, research and development than their international peers. Uncertainty over Brexit, frequent policy changes and squeezed profit margins have made companies reluctant to commit capital. Public investment tells an equally dismal story. Governments have repeatedly scaled back infrastructure spending, cancelled major projects, and delayed essential upgrades. The northern leg of HS2 got axed, leaving transportation links inadequate for a modern economy. The NHS operates with IT systems that would embarrass a small business. The consequences compound over time. Each year of underinvestment leaves Britain further behind international competitors. German factories produce more with fewer workers because they've invested in automation. French firms compete globally because they've upgraded their capabilities. British companies increasingly can't match this productivity, forcing them to compete on price alone, which means squeezing wages. Without tools and infrastructure to work effectively, British workers resemble craftsmen trying to build with blunt instruments. They work hard, but produce less value than international peers, not through any fault of their own, but because nobody gave them proper equipment. Brexit slammed the brakes on trade, and trade drives productivity. When companies access bigger markets, they specialize, innovate, and improve. When trade barriers rise, this process reverses. Britain chose to erect barriers with its largest trading partner, and wages are paying the price. The numbers tell the story. The Office for Budget Responsibility expects trade intensity, meaning trade as a share of GDP, to drop 15% in the long run compared to remaining in the EU. We're already partway there. UK trade intensity sits several percent below 2019 levels, while other G7 nations have seen increases. Academic studies by the London School of Economics estimates the new trade arrangements reduced goods exports by around 6% in 2022, worth roughly £27 billion, with exports to the EU falling by over 13%. These aren't just statistics, they're lost opportunities. A Birmingham manufacturer who once sold across Europe now faces paperwork, delays, and costs that make exports unviable. They shrink operations, cancel expansion plans, and can't afford pay rises. Multiply this across thousands of firms, and you see how trade friction becomes wage stagnation. The service sector, Britain's supposed strength, hasn't escaped damage. Yes, financial and legal services exports have grown since 2019, but not enough to fully offset goods trade losses. More importantly, the high-paying service jobs concentrate in London and the South East, doing little for wages in former industrial heartlands. Beyond raw trade volumes, Brexit disrupted the technology and knowledge flows that boost productivity. European supply chains brought expertise and innovation. EU workers filled skill gaps and brought new methods. Collaborative research projects advanced British capabilities. These benefits proved harder to replace than politicians promised. Britain's housing crisis acts like a giant tax on wages. When the median home costs nearly 8 times median earnings, and renters spend over 36% of income on housing, pay rises vanish into landlords' pockets. Workers might earn more on paper, but their standard of living doesn't improve. The geography of housing costs makes everything worse. London and the South East offer the highest-paying jobs but charge astronomical rents. A software developer might earn £70,000 in London but live worse than someone earning £40,000 in Newcastle. This breaks the basic equation where higher productivity jobs deliver better living standards. Housing costs prevent workers moving to productive jobs. The housing shortage forces horrible trade-offs. Young workers commute hours daily because they can't afford to live near work. Parents choose between career advancement and staying near family support. Key workers abandon entire regions because even full-time professional wages don't cover basic housing costs. Planning restrictions strangle housing supply where it's needed most. The most productive cities, where wages could grow faster, build the fewest homes relative to demand. Local authorities block development, existing homeowners resist new construction, and the political system rewards nimblism over growth. Every rejected planning application represents wages that won't rise and productivity that won't improve. The knock-on effects ripple through the economy. High housing costs mean less consumer spending, reducing demand for other businesses. Young people delay family formation because they can't afford suitable homes. Entrepreneurship suffers when potential founders pour savings into rent rather than new ventures. Britain faces a peculiar problem. Plenty of workers, but not enough with the right skills. The economy desperately needs programmers, engineers, and technicians while producing graduates in subjects with limited employment prospects. This mismatch constrains productivity and wages simultaneously. Companies can't adopt new technologies without workers who understand them. A manufacturing firm might want to install advanced robotics, but can't find technicians to operate them. A logistics company could improve efficiency with better software, but lacks developers to implement it. These firms either abandon improvements or pay premium wages for scarce skills, leaving less for other workers. The education system hasn't adapted quickly enough. Universities expanded rapidly, but often in courses disconnected from economic needs. Further education colleges, which could provide technical skills, suffered funding cuts and low status. Apprenticeships declined for decades before recent revival attempts, leaving a generation without vocational training. Adult education virtually disappeared. Workers who need reskilling face expensive courses, limited availability, and no income support while studying. A 40-year-old factory worker made redundant can't easily retrain for growing sectors. They end up in lower-paid service work, dragging down average wages. Management quality represents another skill gap. British managers score poorly on international comparisons of basic practices like target setting, performance monitoring, and talent development. Poor management means even good workers produce less. Studies find that improving management practices to best-in-class levels could boost productivity by 10 to 20%. The long-tail problem persists because skills don't diffuse through the economy. Leading firms might adopt best practices, but the vast majority of businesses operate with outdated methods. Knowledge stays trapped in pockets rather than spreading. Workers at frontier companies see wage growth while everyone else stagnates. When the NHS becomes less productive, when schools deliver worse outcomes per pound spent, when government departments need more staff to provide the same services, the entire economy suffers. Public services employ millions and consume vast resources. Their productivity crisis has become Britain's productivity crisis. Health service productivity remained roughly 10% below 2019 levels by 2024, after falling sharply during the pandemic and only partially recovering. Every nurse working harder but achieving less, every doctor spending more time on administration than patients, every hospital running inefficiently drags down national statistics and constrains wage growth everywhere. The causes run deep. Underinvestment in technology means medical staff waste time on paperwork that software should handle. Crumbling facilities require constant patching rather than an efficient operation. Staff shortages create vicious cycles where overwork leads to sickness, requiring expensive agency cover. The system spends more to achieve less. Education faces similar struggles. Teachers drown in bureaucracy whilst buildings literally crumble. Support staff got cut to save money, leaving expensive teachers doing administrative tasks. Technology that could transform learning remains unaffordable or poorly implemented. Productivity stagnates while private tutoring booms, showing that parents recognize the system's failures. These productivity problems spread beyond direct employment effects. Poor health outcomes mean workers take more sick days and retire earlier. Inadequate education leaves young people unprepared for modern jobs. Inefficient public services consume tax revenues that could support growth. The whole economy pays the price through lower productivity and wages. Even when wages do rise, government policy ensures workers don't feel richer. Frozen tax thresholds mean inflation pushes millions into higher tax brackets without real income gains. This fiscal drag operates like a stealth tax rise, taking every large bite from pay packets. The numbers are staggering. By freezing the personal allowance and higher rate threshold, the government will raise tens of billions annually by decade's end. Millions more people will pay income tax and millions more will pay the 40% higher rate. Someone earning the same real wage as 5 years ago might pay thousands more in tax. National insurance cuts in 2024 provide temporary relief, but the threshold freezes overwhelm these gains over time. Workers see gross wages rise with inflation, but find their take-home pay barely moves. The psychological impact matters. When workers see deductions consuming their pay rises, motivation suffers. Why push for promotion when extra earnings disappear in tax? Why work overtime when the government takes 40%? The tax system increasingly punishes effort rather than rewarding it. Combined with housing costs, energy bills, and childcare expenses, the tax squeeze leaves even more middle-income earners struggling. The traditional middle-class lifestyle, a decent home annual holiday, some savings, requires incomes that few jobs provide after all deductions. No wonder wage growth feels meaningless to so many. Britain's wage stagnation isn't one problem, but dozens reinforcing each other. Low investment means low productivity. Low productivity means companies can't afford pay rises. Brexit reduced trade, cutting productivity further. Housing costs consume any gains. Skills don't match needs. Public services drain resources while delivering less. Taxes take what's left. Each issue would challenge any economy. Together they've created a doom loop where problems compound rather than resolve. Low wages mean less consumer spending, reducing business revenues and investment capacity. Young people can't afford education or training, perpetuating skill shortages. Key workers leave for countries offering better prospects, creating brain drain. And the financial shocks keep coming. The 2008 crisis, Brexit uncertainty, pandemic disruption, energy price spikes each knocked an already fragile economy. Rather than building resilience between crises, Britain used up buffers and accumulated problems. The economy resembles a patient with multiple chronic conditions where treating one often worsens another. International comparisons hurt. German workers saw real wage growth despite similar challenges. French employees enjoy stronger purchasing power. Even America, with all its problems, delivered better wage growth for many occupations. Britain chose a particularly painful path, and workers paid the price. The political systems seem unable to respond. Short-term thinking dominates when these problems require decade-long solutions. Each government tinkers at margins rather than addressing fundamentals. Brexit divided the country, making coherent economic strategy impossible. Meanwhile, wages stagnate and living standards decline. Reversing wage stagnation requires attacking multiple problems simultaneously. No single policy offers salvation, but combined efforts could restart wage growth within years rather than decades. Investment must increase dramatically. Both public and private capital spending needs to reach at least G7 average levels, meaning billions more annually. This means stable tax policies that encourage business investment, serious infrastructure programs that don't get cancelled with each election, and public services equipped for modern productivity. The planning system needs revolution, not reform. Build homes where jobs exist, build infrastructure to support growth, build the energy systems a modern economy requires. Stop letting local objections override national needs. Skills and education require urgent attention. Expand technical education, support adult retraining, improve management capabilities, make it easier for workers to acquire new skills throughout their careers. Connect education providers with employer needs rather than operating in isolation. Trade relationships need pragmatic improvement, whether through closer EU alignment or global agreements. Reducing friction helps productivity. Ideology shouldn't override economic reality. If rejoining certain European programs boosts wages, politics shouldn't prevent it. Public service productivity must improve through technology and reform. Digital systems that actually work, facilities fit for purpose, workforce policies that retain talent. This requires upfront investment but pays off through better outcomes and low long-term costs. Tax reform should reward work and investment. If thresholds remain frozen, cut rates to compensate. Shift taxation from income to wealth and land. Make the system transparent so workers understand what they pay and why. None of these solutions are easy or cheap. They require political courage, long-term thinking, and accepting that quick fixes don't exist. But continuing the current path guarantees continued stagnation. Britain must choose between difficult changes today or permanent decline tomorrow. 20 years of wage stagnation isn't bad luck or inevitable decline. It's an accumulated result of choices, underinvestment, Brexit frictions, housing shortages, skill mismatches, and productivity failures. These problems reinforce each other, creating a trap that incremental changes can't escape. The alternative is watching another generation work harder for less, wondering why their parents had it so much better.